if you're a rebel sinner, you need the grace of God that doesn't just try to save, but actually saves.
But you can't. If you're a rebel sinner and God didn't pick you, let me make this very clear, under this system, you can't do anything. Behold, the eighth wonder of the world, a desert. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are on location in the backwoods of Louisiana. James White and Leighton Flowers. All right, this was the much plotted debate between them the second time. I remember seeing the Romans 9 debate that they did like 2 or 3 years ago, and I think we all saw it coming that there was going to be a second debate between these two people, but I actually didn't know it was coming. I opened up YouTube one day and I was like, oh my goodness, Leighton Flowers and James White, have to see what's going on. And I was sorely disappointed. It just seemed very immature. There was a lot of immaturity, there was a lot of posturing and things that I just think don't belong in a debate between two Christian men. I didn't really see that on Leighton's side. I thought that Leighton was very magnanimous. I thought he got a little emotional at times, but it was kind of understandable based on the lines of questioning that he was getting. There are other people watching, people who don't respect Christianity at all. It's just a bad showing when this is how Christian people treat one another, and maybe that's just my opinion. If you guys don't have that opinion, that's fine. You can tell me what you think in the comment section. I'm not anti anybody's opinion in the comments, but I'm just kind of trying to call it as I see it. So let's take a look. The full debate will be linked in the comments, so you can go check that out.
Okay, I want to put kind of side by side our two views, and I want to see if you think it's a fair characterization. I believe Jesus is rebuking this unbelieving Israelite crowd by telling them the reason they're not being granted to come to Jesus is because of their continued unbelief. They didn't listen to the Father, and therefore they're not being entrusted to the Son, while you, in contrast, believe Jesus is explaining to a crowd of unbelievers why they can't believe by introducing Calvinistic soteriology, the T, the U, and the I. Is that basically what you think is happening here in John 6?
No, of course, I reject your rabid misrepresentation of Reformed
He's
theology.
not introducing total inability?
I'm going to answer the questions that you asked, okay? Please stop interrupting me. You just presented T and I and all the rest of this stuff.
I was just summarizing to be fast.
No, go ahead.
I was just summarizing to be fast.
No, go ahead. What did you want to ask?
I already asked.
Okay, first of all, if you're an interlocutor in a debate, all right, you have every right to interrupt your opponent. That is literally rules 101. If they're not answering your question to your satisfaction or you need clarification, because remember, you only get like 10 minutes. You're able to interrupt and be like, stay on point. Now, to a degree, I get it. You don't want to interrupt too much or else you're not letting your opponent speak. And it's fair to call that out. It's fair to say, I don't feel like I'm being heard. You keep interrupting. I don't get to answer your questions. Leighton says, is this the way that you see this thing, with your Calvinistic soteriology? Then James, he does this a lot, by the way. He kind of goes, oh, that is a rabid misunderstanding of Reformed theology. But his point generally has nothing to do with the first kind of insult, the drive-by insult that he gives. So Leighton's kind of clarifying, I wasn't trying to give a giant doctrine on Reformed theology. I'm just summarizing to be fast. And then James is like, not going to answer it anymore because of the interruption. Even if someone is breaking the rules, you don't want to come across as a curmudgeon. Don't play the school marm card. Don't play the, no, what's your question? What are you asking?
Whenever it says no one can, you don't think that that's reflecting on the T of total inability, the default condition that you refer to in your book?
Yes, of course it is.
Okay,
of course it is.
Okay,
I just don't believe that's quote-unquote Calvinistic theology is being introduced. It's biblical theology. It's been there from the beginning, from Genesis.
All right, okay.
Oh, come on. No. So basically, he just agreed that the question that he framed, that Calvinistic theology is in fact being introduced, but he's like, but I don't think it's Calvinistic. I think it's biblical theology. Everybody thinks that their theology is biblical. Leighton Flowers is not coming into this debate under the assumption that his theology isn't biblical. So you don't get to just hijack and say, he's telling them Calvinistic theology, but he's not telling them Calvinistic theology, he's telling them biblical theology because biblical and Calvinist are intertwined. That's what the debate is about, so you don't get to assume the side. I don't even know why he objected to the characterization if he was just going to admit that it was the truth.
You said, quote, there's no reason to be discussing the sovereign grace of God and things like that with someone who just doesn't even believe. And so I'm wondering why you think Jesus is introducing these doctrines to a bunch of grumbling, gungus-mooing Israelites.
Massive
That's a fair
category
question, by the way.
difference. Wow. He is
Again, he did it
explaining
again.
the fact
He did
that
it
these
again.
individuals have
All
come
he is
seek-
doing is before he answers the question, he has this drive-by insult, but he never goes on to explain it. He's like, massive category error, begging the question. Oh, you're appealing to philosophy. It's perfectly fine to say that someone's doing something if they're doing it, but you have to explain it afterwards. And these are crafted insults at your opponent and their arguments without substantiation. The only thing that is proving right now that's a category error is the authority in your voice, Dr. White. That's all it is. It's just name calling, and it's not good. It's not good to name call. There are people who are watching this that are not Christians, guys. We're supposed to be giving a good witness of both of our sides, even in our heated discussions, but
they are not seeking him for who he is as the Messiah. They do not understand that he is the source of spiritual life. And why would he say that to them? Well, because it's recorded for us in Scripture so that 2,000 years later we could be sitting here and looking at it.
basically that Jesus in John 6 is doing something just for the heck of it, is basically the answer. That's it. Why is he telling reprobated people who don't have any ability to be saved and aren't, a part of the unconditional election, aren't the elected ones, these things? Well, just for our benefit. It had nothing to do with the people then. It was just for us, apparently, is the answer. That's kind of a weird... Why was he even doing it? Why even talk to people then? Why doesn't Jesus just write in a subnote portion in the Bible, hey, this has nothing to do with the actual situation. It's just for you guys later that you can put a U in tulip so you don't just have tulip. So we can make a word with this, basically.
You believe someone must be made alive, regenerated, in order to come to the life giver who is Christ. Yet on page 25 of this book here, drawn by the Father, you wrote, quote, when we come to him, when we believe on him, he becomes the source of our spiritual life. Well, isn't regeneration the source of our spiritual life, not Jesus, on your view?
No. That's so obviously false, I'm not even sure how to address it.
Guys, stop doing that. Stop with the drive-by insult right at the beginning. Dr. White, can you please do a cross-examination where you give an answer, you don't do a drive-by insult at the beginning? It's just posturing. That's all it is. Stop posturing. Just answer the question.
What support do you have for equating this concept of regeneration with the word draw, in the sense that you obviously believe that drawing must involve regeneration because it has to precede their believing, doesn't it?
Well, again, I'm here to debate John chapter 6.
He said that, by the way.
Talk about all sorts of other things. That seems to be your thing.
I just talked about draw.
That seems to be your thing, and I realize, Leighton, it's all you've got. The reality is...
He's like, you think that draw and regeneration are the same. You also said in a book that you think that regeneration comes before salvation. I don't know if that's exactly what he said. So, and he's relating that to John, the chapter, John 6. He said, okay, so how does that work with unconditional election? How does that work with John 6? And now James is like, well, I'm not going to answer the question because you're not asking me a question directly from John 6. What? The two are related. That's why by the way, you should never do this. If you're doing a Calvinistic debate, or you're debating a Calvinist, or Calvinist, by the way, is debating a Molinist or an Arminianist, you shouldn't just go, is Romans 9, 8 through 27, Calvinist in its doctrine? You should debate whether the Bible is Calvinist in its doctrine, because there are parts of the Bible that look Calvinistic, and there's parts that look Arminian, and there's parts that look Molinist. That's why we have all three of those positions that are represented in Christianity proper. So if you're going to debate, why would you debate someone on the strong field of Romans 9 and then not go out to other parts of the Bible that support your position? James White's position isn't the Bible position that now Leighton Flowers has to disagree with. Both of them need to make a case of why their position is more logical for exegesis to John 6. And now has he answered a question really so far? I don't think he has. I don't think there's been much questions answered. So he can say that the questions are bad that Leighton's asking, but you still have to answer them. Or else what are you doing here? Just get up and leave if you're not going to answer the question.
Can you explain from your perspective why this audience can't believe and why they're being judged for their unbelief, if that's a default condition from birth that they have no control over?
That's a good question.
Well, again, God is demonstrating to the entire universe his justice according to Ephesians chapter 1, the praise of his glorious grace.
So you think it's just for God to condemn
Thank you.
somebody who by default can't believe?
You're allowed, why is he huffing? You're allowed to interrupt the interlocutor if you want to get more clarification. And also, that's a terrible answer. He said, why is God judging people who have no control? In fact, God in this soteriology system has forced them to sin. So why is God now going to judge them for that? If basically the fault is his, that they're even sinning in the first place, why is that just? And he says, well, he's doing that to show his justice. You don't get to presuppose that it's just when the whole question is, how is that just?
I will continue with my answer to the initial question, unless you just want to say we're not going to be able to get anywhere with this.
No, go ahead.
Okay, good.
Well, you've made it to where we
yes,
can't
he
get
is
anywhere with this
demonstrating
today.
The praise of his glorious grace
been a
from
waste of
Ephesians
time.
chapter 1 in both the salvation of a undeserving people and in the condemnation of people who love their sin and remain in their rebellion. That's the answer of Ephesians chapter 1.
So now,
verse 6.
now the
That's
Calvinist
answer I
believes
give
in
as
free
well.
will.
So it's
He
a
believes
demonstration
that
of
now
God's
they can be
justice to
condemned
condemn
because they're
people for
free.
something they have no control over.
I utterly reject, and you should know as a quote-unquote former Reformed minister that that is a gross misrepresentation, that we believe that the
Explain why.
non-elect
Explain why.
love their sin, that they
There we
are
go.
invested
Okay,
in
there's
their
an
sin,
explanation.
and to say that they have no control over it means that as the incarnate one, Jesus had no control over what he did in time as well. We reject that because we
Okay, that's-
believe
that's a
everything
good
the Bible
enough answer.
teaches rather than just small snippets that we've accepted.
Is that why all the Calvinists only ever debate on John 6, Romans 9, and all the passages that are strong for them? Like, let's do a debate sometime on like that part in Joshua where it says, choose you this day who you'll serve, and just that verse. And then I'll pick out a Calvinist and be like, now exegete this. And the moment they go outside the text, I'll be like, no, we're exegeting this verse. You only get to be in this verse. No other Bible. You don't go anywhere else to tell me anything. You just have to stay here. Unproductive debate. To exegete a verse, you have to go to other Bible verses and to where the words used and be like, hey, in this part of the Bible, it's used this way, and this part is used that way. But no one should engage in that kind of debate. It's silliness. That would be a silly debate. What we should say is, does the Bible teach unconditional election? That should be the debate topic here, and then you should be able to go anywhere you want to.
It's moral accountability,
Golly.
because I think that's the major Achilles heel of the
Is that going to be in
Calvinist.
John 6?
It's exactly dealing with John 6, because it's by
gosh, there it
default.
is
You say
again.
it's by default in your own exposition of John 6. You say it's by default they're unable to believe, and so that is the
Because of their
root.
sin, yes.
Because of their sin, or because
Yes.
they were born in that decreed
Yes,
state.
they are the sons and daughters of Adam. That's what Romans 5
Okay,
teaches.
so
yes.
let's put ourselves in the shoes. Let's give a name and a face to one of these people in the crowd that's gungus mooing. Let's call him Rob the reprobate.
I don't know what
He
that
gu- he
means,
gun-
but
he
that's
gungus
fun.
moos, and then Rob turns around, he walks
Gungus
away,
moo.
and he drops dead of a heart attack. He's non-elect, so
Okay,
he
Rob
goes
is
to
dead.
hell. On what basis is Rob judged? He had absolutely
question.
no control
It's a good question.
over whether he listened and learned from the Father or Jesus.
It's a good question.
Why, on what basis is he condemned?
Let's play dodge that question. Do you think Dr. White will dodge the question? Do you think Dr. White will give an insult and then give an answer that wasn't directly according to the question? Or do you think he'll just refuse to answer it at all? That's the
Okay,
question.
absolutely no control means God must extend his grace to rebel sinners. That's what's being
I didn't
said.
say that.
That
You
is
didn't
what's
say
being
that.
said. If you say he has no
That isn't
control,
what's being
that
said.
means he is being forced to be a bad guy, and God's standing there with a gun to be a bad guy. No, he's not. In fact, God is restraining his evil.
Why is he restraining
justly
his evil if he already
judged
decreed
for
it?
the love of his sin. It's not a matter of being forced into doing anything. It's not a matter of being incapable of doing anything.
Wait a minute. Wait. If I was if at my inception I was created to never be able to hear the words of Christ, I was doomed because I would never be converted. That's irresistible grace, by the way. Irresistible grace is that God saves you. You do nothing of it. He picks who he wants, and those people are saved, and you can't respond. You can't say no, you can't say yes. So none of us have a shot except the people he picks at the beginning. And if that's the case, I can't be saved under that system unless God has picked me to be saved. Therefore, how am I to be judged for my sin when I couldn't not do it? Whether I love it or not, whether I'm enjoying it or not, It's like if I'm in prison, enjoying prison, and the door's closed and locked, how am I supposed to, and someone says, hey, you know, you could have gotten out anytime you wanted to, but you loved the prison. That's not true. I did love the prison. I wasn't going to get out, but I couldn't get out. The door was locked. If the door was open and I was loving the prison, and people said, hey, you could have gotten out whenever you wanted, but you just loved the prison, that's a fair argument. I could have gotten out when the door was open. But the door is locked in this system, and they're saying it's okay that it's locked because you're enjoying your time in prison. But in a hypothetical here, if I wasn't enjoying my time in prison, I couldn't leave. The door's locked. So how am I supposed to be judged for not leaving the prison if the prison was not unlocked?
Outside of one thing, and that is, if you're a rebel sinner, you need the grace of God that doesn't just try to save, but actually saves.
But you can't. If you're a rebel sinner and God didn't pick you, make this very clear, under this system, you can't do anything. You better hope and you better pray that God picked you before the foundations of the earth, or else you are screwed. That's it. That's it. There's no hope for you if you weren't picked. And I'm not trying to be mean to anyone. I have a lot of Calvinist friends. I love them dearly. I love Calvinists. The more I get to know them, I dislike their system, the more I get to know it. I'm sorry. This is just my opinion on the matter. But I think at the end of the day, you may not like the charged language. If you were not picked before the foundations of the earth, it's over for you. It doesn't matter. So you just take your lot in life and go to hell, because that's basically all you can do. You cannot be saved under your own volition. You have to hope that you were picked. So this idea that if you're a rebel sinner, you need to get saved, you better hope that you can. You better hope that you were lucky. You won the cosmic lottery.
Did I ever say that God owes anybody anything?
You are definitely implying it, yes.
Did I ever say that he owed Rob anything in the illustration?
Rob the reprobate.
No.
Continue on.
Okay. So on what basis, I'll ask again.
You didn't answer.
On what basis is he being judged?
And I already
What
answered the
basis?
question. He's being judged on the basis that he's in Adam, and therefore he
So
stands
he's being
before-
judged really for Adam's sin.
That's
Okay,
all right.
federal headship, I guess.
I've given the answer. There's no reason to.
You have not. You haven't, and this is kind of weird.
Returning to
Me
the subject of debate in John chapter 6, I am still.
Oh, bless. Come on. Returning to the subject of the debate in John chapter 6, if you don't get that, it's another drive-by insult. He's basically saying that all that Leighton said had nothing to do with John chapter 6, and he's getting us back on track. God, this is so petty. Call me overly pious, but is this petty? Is this just petty? Like, you're a grandfather. You have grandchildren.
You are introducing a distinction between pontes and pos when there's only two words in between
Oh,
them,
gosh.
because you seem to be saying,
By the way, Dr. White knows Greek. If you haven't ever watched one of his debates, he knows Greek. I'll bet you $1,000 that he is going to use those words like Pontus and Pos, I demand that you defend it, knowing full well that Leighton Flowers doesn't actually know Greek. I don't know, maybe he does. I don't think he does know Greek, but like, if you're going to bring in Greek words outside of just to stroke your own ego and inflate, your sense of how much better I am at scholarship than you really should, if you know your interlocutor doesn't know Greek, you should go, okay, you're creating a distinction between Pontus and Pos, which I think is all in anyone. I think that's what the words are. Is saying, hey, and those, there's some things in the Greek that may be a little different than English you may not be aware of, so let me explain. So I think it's a more fair understanding to say that these things are linked together, the all and anyone, all those people, that's the same group of people, not two different groups. And then you add in the things that your interlocutor can understand, and then you say, now provide for me why you think it's a distinction. But he's just quoting the words. He's like, you're creating a distinction between Pontus and Pos. Explain why. But, okay, how is that any better than just saying you're creating a distinction between all and anyone? In fact, it would be way better. The audience would know what you're talking about. But it's almost like me knowing the Nigerian words for all and anyone and being like, you're creating a difference between squab blah 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 and squanilili. Like, just to show you I know how Nigerian works. If you're not going to make it clear what you're asking, why are you asking it in Greek? Why not just ask the whole question in Greek if you want to be confusing about it? If you know that much Greek, just ask the whole question that way. And then Leighton won't understand what you're talking about, just like he probably won't understand it here because you know he doesn't speak that language.
everyone hearing from the Father is different than all who are taught by God.
Okay, there we go. He does clarify there.
I just
That's
don't
nice.
assume by a presupposition like you do that people who hear a message automatically have to believe it. I believe that some people can hear a message and choose not to believe it. I believe they can close their ears and their eyes to it.
What if verse 45 actually comes after verse 44 and is describing what the drawing that results
What
in
if it comes after verse
giving
57?
of eternal life and resurrection?
What if it comes after Revelation
if-
and Revelation clarifies?
All who are taught by God,
We're
all
basing this
who
on a
are-
what
who
if
hear from the
now.
Father, all who learn from the Father, is the effective action of God that's provided in Scripture and being described by Jesus. What if that were what would that do to your theological understanding of this text?
Hey, how about this? What if it's not? That's the core of the debate. What if you're right, if everything lines up with your soteriological system, you're right. But the point of the debate is, what if it's not that way? What if it isn't
If
that?
that were true, then your presupposition, tulip, would be true.
Would
and
be
I
true.
don't think your
There you go.
presupposition is true.
Wait, that's a nice-
I
that's a
believe
good
they
admission.
actually have the responsibility,
So-
the ability to respond to the teaching
He's
of
admitting
God.
that
They
if
can
it's
deny
true,
it
it's
or they can accept it.
So when I point to the words Pontus and Pos, is it a parlor trick on my part to ask you to substantiate that assertion?
You can't assume that those are linked. Do you know they're the same? Let me give you an example. If I said all of the people going to all of my employees are going to the party, and then anyone who stays for the after party to the party, those people will be given $5. Those are two distinct groups, aren't they? I didn't say all of my employees will stay for the after party. I said all will come and any of those people will come. Now, it's very possible that all of those people will show up and they will be a part of the anyone, but those are two distinct groups. So you don't just get to assume that those are a linked group. James needs to make a defense to why those are together groups, but he's throwing the burden. This is the atheist-theist thing. Like, I don't need to make an argument. I'm denying the existence of God. Yes, you do. You need to make an argument as to why they are linked groups. You don't just get to assume that John is a Calvinist and lines up with your way of thinking. So they very well could be distinct groups. That the jury is very much out on that. And to throw Greek into the ether and be like Pont and Pathos and the Theos of the Eudokia of his Theonomos or the Angelos of Angeloses, it's just, it's to inflate your pride at that point. Those aren't useful distinctions, and you know it. By the way, hearing and learning, last time I checked, are active verbs. Or active, yeah. James White said they were passive. Since when is hearing and learning passive? I think you'd have to give an argument for why those are passive. I think those would be active, which would make a distinction between the all and the anyone. All who come, and then anyone who hears and learns will be saved.
And the text is coherent
Yep.
in saying that all are taught by God, everyone hearing. You distinguish. I'm asking you, give us an argument.
Why
that's
is the
not
text
about
coherent?
My alleged presuppositions or somebody who's not
That
here.
seems
You're the
to
one who brought up the
Show
create a
me
distinction itself.
where from the text you make the distinction that is absolutely necessary for your position.
Because hearing and learning are active verbs in Leighton Flowers' system. All come. Those who hear and learn are the ones a part of the anyone. That's how you make the distinction between the two groups. How are you missing that? You know why? Because all and anyone, there's things in between you have to look at. If it was just all who come, you wouldn't have to create the distinctions. It said all who come will be saved.
That means that every one of them have no excuse because they have heard what they need to hear. Everyone has been taught
Amen.
of God. Everyone who hears from the Father and learns
There you go. There's the
comes to
distinction
me.
right there.
Not everyone who
Yep.
is taught will listen and learn. Some of them will close their
Yes.
eyes.
I know
I don't know how that can be more clear, Dr.
I
White.
know you're making the distinction.
How could it be more clear?
But it is painfully clear to those of us
It's
that are
so
looking
clear that you're the first one to be able to interpret that way. I mean, it's not so clear if
It's so
obviously
clear.
a lot of people interpret differently than you who also know Greek,
you
Dr.
just
White.
You just said that if
That's a
these
fine
are
answer. Move
actually
on.
descriptions
Move on to
of
another
the
question. That's.
effective actions of God, that the debate is over.
But they're not, is what he's arguing.
My
Yes.
understanding is correct.
Let me put it out this way. If God was a Calvinist, the debate's over. But that's not the debate. Or maybe it is. But that's what's up for debate. Is he that? Why are you just assuming that? And Leighton Flowers has enough integrity to say, you're right. If all those things are right, then my perspective would be wrong, yours would be right. And James is like, okay, well, since we already know my perspectives are right, then you lose. That's a circular argument.
It is fundamentally necessary for you, if you're going to deal with the text, for you to be able to explain why the scriptural citation from either Isaiah 54 or Jeremiah 31, Pontes didaktoi theou, is different than pas ha akusas para tu patras. You have to explain why you're making that distinction from the text, or just
I really
admit,
hate this trick,
I don't
by the
know,
way.
and it's presuppositional, and we're done with it.
Again, I don't assume, as you do,
He just said that.
just because someone is
He
taught
just told you why.
that they will necessarily, therefore, listen and learn.
Yeah.
I believe
That's a
that
good
if
answer.
a student is in a classroom and they don't learn, it's not because the teacher doesn't really want them to learn, or because the teacher has some hidden agenda or a secret hidden agenda where two wills of the teacher. I think the teacher actually says, when I want you to hear and learn and listen, I really want you to hear and learn and listen. And when I hold out my hands to you all day long, he actually wants them to come. That's what I believe. Clear enough?
Nice cover for not being able to answer the question, but I'm done.
Okay. Good. I mean, he's finally done. By the way, a lot of people were getting on to Leighton Flowers. They were like, "Oh, you're getting emotional there." If I'd been badgered for 7 minutes after I answered your question and then answered it again and again and again and again, and you can't get it through your mind, the answer that I'm giving to the question, even if you don't think it's legitimate, why are you still asking the same question? And it makes sense to get a little bit testy. Now, should you get emotional in debates? Probably not. It doesn't really help. But I get where he's coming from. Is it clear enough? Yeah, do you understand it now? And by the way, kind of the jab at the two wills, that's kind of smart, because in Calvinism, God has two wills, right? He has his declarative will and his secret will. And his secret will, I don't want to be mean, but it seems like it goes against his declared will. He's like, his declared will is everyone. I hope that everyone comes to Christ. And his secret will is, but some of them won't. I hope they don't. I hope some of them don't, or something like. He commands you all to come to Christ, but then he basically is a man who is grabbing two of his sons and saying, "Hey, I want you to race," and one of them starts, and then he grabs the other one by the belt. He's like, "I want you to race. Why aren't you racing? My will was that you race, but my secret will was that I was going to grab your belt and not let you race with your brother, see if you could win." But, all right. I mean, if you're actively looking to get more people on your side, I would not go about it in this way. It just seemed very indignant. It seemed like he was very frustrated. It seemed like he didn't really like Dr. Flowers, and maybe he doesn't, but you can't let that show. I think, in my opinion, it wasn't even close. I think that Dr. Flowers, Leighton Flowers, won by a mile. I know that's not really what it's about, who won. Really, it should be about, can we get good conversations together? Can we actually discuss these points so that as a family of God, we can make some progress so we know how to interact with each other a little bit better? That's what I think these debates are for. I don't think, if that was the goal, I don't think that happened at all. And this is not anti-James White. We'll do something with James White. We'll react to some of his stuff. I think some of it's good. He's helped me in a lot of ways. I've read some of his books. But when he goes and talks to someone who has a genuine heart and is like not trying to use debate tactics, I really find it off-putting. I don't like the way that he conducted himself in this debate. This is not against Calvinism or against Calvinists. It kind of may seem that way. I'm not a Calvinist, but I just don't think that this debate was a good representation of your side. You're free to disagree with me. If you guys want to see more, if you want to see more from Dr. Flowers or Dr. White or anything else like that, please put the suggestions in the comment section. We will be happy to react to them. I would love to hear more from both of these sides and these arguments. It was just a little bit disappointing.